Hello everyone, Michael here. In today's video we're going to check out a new plugin from Tone Boosters called Equalizer Pro. Now I know what you're already thinking, Michael, it's just another equalizer that's not really interesting. Well, this one can do a few things no other equalizer can, and one of those new features is relevant for immersive audio production, which is what we talk about on this channel. So here we go, let's take a look at Tone Boosters' new Equalizer Pro. The feature I'm particularly interested in today's video is Equalizer Pro's ability to work on a multi-channel track. In fact, the plugin can handle up to 64 channels simultaneously. This is especially relevant for immersive audio, be it in Dolby Atmos, Ambisonics or any other 3D audio format. So here's what we're going to do today. First, we're going to check out the basic functionality of Equalizer Pro on a stereo track, and then we'll move on to a 64-channel immersive audio track in 7th order Ambisonics format and use Equalizer Pro to do some generalized mid-side processing. The trick that I'm going to show you in the second part of this video will actually break some immersive audio rules, and I can already imagine some people hammering away in the comment section, but as I always say, there are no rules. If it sounds good, it is good. Before I dive into today's audio session, a quick but important note. I purchased Tone Boosters Equalizer Pro myself. This is not a sponsored video in any sense of the word, and therefore nobody but me had any influence on what I'm going to say. And I would also be interested hearing from you. What's your favorite equalizer and why? Do you have Tone Boosters new EQ? And if so, how do you like it? Let me know in the comment section below. And with that being said, let's open up Reaper. I'm working on a Mac today, but this has no relevance whatsoever. Everything that I'm going to show you works in Windows in exactly the same way. I've opened up a very simple session in Reaper with a track where I'm using a loop from a sample pack developer that I actually like quite a lot. I'm going to leave a link in the description, and I've already opened up Equalizer Pro, so let's just check it out. Let's play our little track and play around with it. Now, if you look at Equalizer Pro, on the top portion of the interface here, you have the usual suspects. So you can create different programs, you can load different presets, and it actually has a really nice preset browser. You can A, B, C, D, so you can have different settings. You can change the interface settings. Currently I have it at 85%. You can change the way the interface looks, and you also have certain other settings that you can set or unset. So that's very standard. Now here in the middle we have the traditional EQ section with the different filters that we can drag around. As soon as we click on a filter, we have this additional window that opens up, very similar to what you have in Pro EQ, for example, also in the Kirchhoff EQ. And here we have the things that you would normally be able to do. We can change the type of filter, and here is actually one of the things there where Tone Boosters Equalizer Pro actually kind of shines. It has a lot of different types of filters, so if you look at the different options that we have, we can not only use a traditional filter, we can also use something like a filter that only acts on the transient, or one that only acts on the sustain portion, only on the sibilance, only on the background, all kinds of different things that you can change. We have low shell filters, we have high shell filters, we have brick wall filters, we have tilting filters, we have bandpass filter, notch filter, low cut and high cut filter. So it's actually a very unique and complete set of filters that you have. Now for each filter you can set the gain, obviously, it's an EQ. You can set the Q value and the frequency. You have this additional button here that allows you to switch between positive and negative values. So if you, for example, want to just kind of switch that out, you click on that and you get the negative value and you can switch that back. Here you have a little kind of lock that allows you to lock the filter, and that essentially means that you can now not change the gain, only the frequency. That can actually come in quite handy. Who didn't search for a certain frequency in the past? So, kind of that's where you can do that. You lock the gain and then just kind of change the frequency. Then we have a dynamic section. Well, actually, kind of there's this one additional thing. You can also switch that over to snapping, and what that does, it actually snaps the filter back to 0. So if you get close to the 0 value, it will actually snap that. Now here we also have the dynamic section. So if I change the range, for example, it automatically changes to a dynamic filter, and then I can change the threshold here, and I can change the attack value. I can disable the dynamic portion if I want, or enable it. I can change the slope value. It's currently at 6 dB. There are a lot of different options, goes up to 96 dB, so that's essentially brick walling. And then we have the individual channel selection. Currently we are working in a stereo mode, so we have left channel, right channel. Now we can make that a filter that works on the mid or on the side, for example. So let's just kind of make that a mid filter here. And as soon as you do that, you will see here that you have different visualizations. You see the stereo effect, you see the effect on the mid section, and if I add a filter that only acts on the side channel, for example. So essentially I also have the kind of graph for the side, or how the EQ is affecting the side channel. So that's actually kind of pretty neat and fairly nice. And then on the bottom we have an EQ match section that allows us to match the EQ to anything that we like to come in. We can change the visualization of the equalizer. There are a couple of other things that we can do. So for example, we can visualize everything in table form. If you want to do that, you can do that. And then finally we have here the output section, and while this EQ does not really have a auto EQ option, what you can do is you can measure the loudness. So let's measure the loudness here, and then I can match. So if I click on outmatch, it will sort of adjust the loudness accordingly. So in this particular case it wasn't really a big change. So it doesn't really have an auto EQ, but you can adjust the output according to what you've set in the equalizer. Now let's take this one step further and switch over to a 64 channel track to see how Equalizer Pro performs in multi-channel mode. For this purpose we are going to swap out the audio for a drum track and use 64 channel 7th order ambisonics to move the drum track around in 3-dimensional space. We're then going to use a little trick that I showed in a previous video to pull the low end information into the center of the sound field. What we're going to do is similar to what you would do in a stereo session when you put a high-pass filter on the side channel of a track. Now if you're interested in learning more about this trick, I'll leave a link to the original video where I explained the details of this advanced mid-side processing approach in the description below. By the way, this guy is not me, he just looks like me, but did you know that every single person in this image has subscribed to my channel? That's actually true, all of them have. However, YouTube tells me that chances are you have not. So if you are not yet subscribed to this channel and you're still watching me at this point, subscribe now. And don't forget to press the like button on the way down to the subscribe button. Anyway, back to our rebirth session. So I've now swapped out the previous track with a simple drum track, with a simple drum loop, because that's really all I need for what I want to demonstrate. Let's just have a listen. So as you can hear, very, very simple. Here is my instance of Equalizer Pro, and obviously I still have a 2-channel audio right now with left channel and right channel. Now the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm actually going to switch that over to a 64 channel track, because that's the maximum number of channels that Equalizer Pro can handle. So let's just go into the settings here and let's turn that into 64 channels. Here we have 64 channels. Now as soon as I do that, if I can now go into the channel selection menu, I now see that I have significantly more channels than I had before. In fact, I have 64. Now the way this interface works is a little daunting at first, but it just comes with the territory. There's a lot of channels that you have, and there isn't really any good way to visualize that. Now the way they have done that here is that you see the first 16 channels always, and then the remaining channels you have this kind of selector here. Here you have channel 17 plus, which starts at number 16, because the numbering starts at 0. So here's from the 17th channel onwards, from the 31st channel onwards, from the 45th channel onwards, and from the 59th channel onwards. And so for the higher channel counts, you need to kind of switch out here. Not quite sure of how I think about that. Is that something that I like? I think it's a reasonable way to approach it, because if you're working with that many channels, usually you're familiar with the way, or with the problem that you have to usually kind of make a couple of concessions to the user interface because there are just so many channels that you need to work with. Now, one thing that's interesting is that you still have the mid-side option, but the mid and the side option here only work on the first two channels. So if you select those, you can create a filter that acts on the side channel, but it's only the side channel with respect to the first two channels. That can be useful in certain situations, but it might not be. They chose to do it that way. It's fine. Usually you wouldn't allow kind of mid-side selection if you have multi-channel audio, but that's perfectly fine. Now we have two additional buttons here. We can turn all channels on, or we can turn on channels off. In this particular case, essentially the filter is acting on nothing, or here the filter is acting on everything. And obviously we can select individual channels and turn all of them individually on and off. So everything kind of is actually working quite well, with the only kind of little caveat that the interface is slightly confusing, but I think it's once again it's a concession that you are most likely willing to make if you're working with that many channels. So let's make use of our 64 channels, and the easiest way for me to demonstrate that Equalizer Pro works with 64 channels is to turn that into 7th order ambisonics, because 7th order ambisonics uses up 64 channels. Now the way I'm going to do that is with the IEM plugin suite. That's a suite of plugins that allow you to work with ambisonics audio up to 7th order. If you're not familiar with those, I'm going to leave some links in the description below. And the plugins themselves, they are free, so you can just download them and start working with them. So the first thing I'm going to need is I'm going to need an encoder, and I'm going to use the stereo encoder here. And let's add that here. This essentially need to be set to 7th order. It automatically detected that it has 64 channels available, so it's going to use the maximum order, and that is 7th. And then we need to swap the equalizer, because I actually want to equalize the ambisonic signal and not the original drum track. And then I'm going to convert it back into stereo so that you guys can hear something, and I'm going to use the binaural decoder plugin for an IEM. Now this is quite frankly a little bit of a no-no what I'm going to do here, because binaural audio is primarily meant for listening with headphones, and what I'm going to do actually only makes sense if you're listening to the audio with speakers. However, there are quite a few people who are using binaural panning as an effect, and if this is something that you do, then definitely what I'm doing here makes a lot of sense. So just be aware, what I'm doing here is a little unconventional, but it proves the point that Equalizer Pro can work on 64 channels. So let's have a listen what we have right now. So once again, we have the stereo track. The stereo track is converted into 7th order ambisonics, is then sent through Equalizer Pro. At the moment, the equalizer isn't doing anything. We haven't set up any filters, and then it's going to be converted back into binaural audio for you guys to hear. So let's have a brief listen here. So that's the audio in binaural. Now, as you can see, some of the channels here are receiving signals, and that has to do with the way the audio object is positioned. Currently, left and right channel are sitting right in front of me. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to spread that out a little so that we have information on more channels and not on just a few here. So let's just kind of change the width, and then the azimuth maybe, and then kind of bring it up a little. Then we see we have essentially information on all channels. These, by the way, are the 64 7th order ambisonics channels, so don't get confused by that. Right now, for example, it doesn't make a whole lot of difference to do any mid or side processing, because we are currently in the ambisonics domain, and we have actually information on all 64 of them. So that is actually pretty neat. Now, if you're using binaural audio as an effect, one thing that you would want to do is you want to make sure that there isn't any low-end information in the sides of your final binaural rendering. And in order to demonstrate what I mean, what I've done here is I've added an instance of Decibel. That's actually a really nice visualization software, visualization plugin, and it has a nice preset where I can monitor left and I can monitor the mid and the side information. So right now the resulting binaural signal essentially has a lot of low-end information in the sides, and usually, especially if you are using that once again as an effect, you don't want to have that. So what you would normally do is you would put a high-pass filter on the sides, And actually, let me just do that here. We have a very capable equalizer here, Equalizer Pro. So let's just add that here. Put that in front of, and let's add something only in the sides, and let's do a low cut filter. And if we bring that up, we can see here in decibel essentially how the low-end information in the side channel is slowly disappearing here. And that usually makes sure that the low end is clean if you're listening to it on systems. So, for example, in a club where essentially there could be a lot of phasing issues with the side information. Now, so let me just kind of disable this instance of Equalizer Pro again. Now, the nice thing about Equalizer Pro is that we can actually now do that directly in the ambisonics domain. So we don't have to actually kind of convert that into binaural. We can actually kind of do this very same thing in ambisonics. And the trick that we're going to do is a result of the way ambisonics works. And if you're not familiar with that, I'm going to leave links in the description below once again where I explain how that actually works. The very easy way, or the kind of the very simple explanation, is that in an ambisonic signal, the first channel is really the mono channel. So that's the mid channel, if you like. So the first channel is just the mid channel. And the remaining channels are sort of, you can think of those as a generalization of the side channels. There actually are more side channels. It's not just one, because we're in three-dimensional space now. So the second, third, and fourth channel are the side channels in the three directions: horizontal, vertical, and the depth information. And the remaining 60 channels are then higher order side channels. You can think of it that way. So what we can do here is exactly the same thing that we did with the binaural rendering. We can do that already in the ambisonics domain by simply high passing all the side channels. And once again, it's only the mid channel is the first channel, and all the other 63 channels are the side channels. So let's do that. So I'm going to simply put an high pass filter on the side channels here. So let's just play the audio. So let me select this thing here, and let's make this a low cut filter. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all filters with the exception of the first one, and that now essentially puts an high pass on all the sides. So let's move that up, and let's open up decibel again so that we see what's actually happening here. So if we move that up here, we essentially see that we are having exactly the same effect that we had by putting a high-pass filter at the resulting binaural rendering. So let's put that here somewhere, and we can maybe change the slope in order to make that a little bit more aggressive. So once again, if I turn it off here, let's turn the Equalizer Pro off. Right, so I have more low end here on the sides. If I turn it on, I have less on the sides. And I can obviously also do kind of counter that a little. So let's just put a shelf, and let's put that shelf only on the mid information. So let's turn all off, and let's just kind of only use that filter for the mid information, and that will elevate the signal in the mids, which is once again the first channel in the ambisonic signal, and cuts out everything on the sides. So that way we can use Equalizer Pro as sort of an advanced version of a kind of plugin that allows us to cut out the sides of an ambisonic signal. Now, obviously, we can do a little bit more than that. So, for example, we could put in additional filters that act only on certain orders within the ambisonic signal. So, for example, if we want to have something that only acts on, so let's turn all filters off, for example. Oops, all off. If I only want to have that on the second order, for example, the second order are essentially the 5 channels from 4 to 8. That would now essentially change the audio or change the information that only goes to the second order in the ambisonic signal. Now, as I said before, what we are doing here is really breaking the rules, because you shouldn't do that. Kind of the ambisonic signal is a very well-defined signal. So what we're doing here isn't really normal. That's not necessarily what you would do. And I already see a lot of people getting upset about me doing it that way. But as I said before, kind of if it sounds good, it is good. So whatever floats your boat, you can do that. And once again, if you're using ambisonics as an intermediate format just to create effects, three-dimensional effects that you in the end going to convert back into stereo, then this is a perfectly fine way to go. So in conclusion, what are my final thoughts on Tone Boosters Equalizer Pro? Well, I think it's an equalizer with one of the most complete feature sets you will find on the market today. I particularly like its ability to work with 64-channel tracks, but that might or might not be important to you. The overall usability is excellent. It follows the very same interface approach that you'll find in other popular EQs, such as FabFilter's Pro Q, for example. So if you are a Pro Q user, you will feel right at home. It offers many different filter options, including filters that act only on the transient or sustained portions of the audio, and I think that is pretty cool. But most importantly, it is quite inexpensive, and Tone Boosters is known for not playing the sales game. So if you are buying this plugin, you can be fairly certain that they won't suddenly reduce the price, leaving you somewhat annoyed that you bought it at a higher price than anybody else. Whether you should buy it or not honestly depends on what you already have in your toolbox, but it's certainly a nice addition if you're missing any of the features Equalizer Pro provides. And as always, try before you buy, so check it out, and if you like it, give it a purchase. But this is all I wanted to say today. Thanks again for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, YouTube thinks that you'll enjoy this one as well, so give it a watch. Don't forget to subscribe and like. If you have any questions or comments, use the comment section below or join us on our Discord server for a chat. The invite link to the Discord is in the description below. And with that being said, see you all in the next video.